Good morning, everybody. Tim only says that because I've got a joke about him in the deck, so we'll see if it's funny or not, won't we? Okay, I'm going to talk today about data. And really, strategy all starts with good health and wellness data, and I'll explain what that means in a few minutes. So just to start, some people in this room don't know really who we are and what we do. So I'm just going to cover a few basics, and then we'll go on to the real meat of the presentation. So LiveSmart is a preventative health business. We're on a mission to build a global preventative health platform. And our primary product is an employee-focused health assessment. We then combine health coaching to help employees make significant improvements to their health. We also work very closely with employers, mostly HR managers, to advise them on health and wellness strategy and implementation over time. That's the core of what we do. But we also think we know health and wellness pretty well. So we've worked with thousands of employees and a large number of employees across the UK, Ireland, and abroad. We've partnered with some of the largest healthcare businesses in the world, including people like AXA, PPP. We are a regulated business by the CQC, which is incredibly important. And another thing which is incredibly important to us, and it should be to the whole industry, is that we do get our results validated by external third-party academics. So we did complete a piece of work last year with Imperial College, and we have a number of ongoing research projects for the future. So these are critical elements of delivering a well-proven, effective, and safe healthcare business. So, on to the presentation. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about the role of data, what science has proven, what business is doing or not, why we have a problem, and how we can go about solving that particular problem. And then I'm going to deep dive into data types, frequency, and more. So it's quite a heavy part of the presentation today that I'm going to be talking about. So let's first of all talk about the role of data in health and wellness strategy development. I think typically what happens within businesses is that somebody says, hey, we want to create a strategy. And that strategy is often a little bit woolly, and it can be that such as, hey, we just want to have the healthiest employees in the country, or we want to do something else that's a little bit untangible. And off the back of that, we tend to roll out a number of different strategies or executions to try and hit that strategy, and then do some sort of evaluation. One of the areas that tends to get skipped in quite a lot of implementations that we see is the review of data sources. So on the right here, we can see a data-led strategy. And really, the first step that we go through when we talk to our clients is to really start by reviewing data sources that are available today. And what we tend to find is that some of them are good, quite a lot of them are bad, and there's a lot of stuff missing. So once we've reviewed that, we start to think, well, actually, where do we want to be in the future if we are to get to the point we want to get to? What data do we need to achieve our goals over 3 years? And once we've started to map out what that vision looks like, we can then start to draw back and say, right, well, we don't have all of that right now, but what can we do in year one to get to our first step? But unless you do those first 2 steps, unfortunately what happens is that you're always kind of playing catch up in the subsequent years. You can then go on to do your strategy for that year, roll out, evaluate, and then loop back to the beginning again. So this is an iterative process, but certainly the data part seems to often get ignored at the beginning. So today I'm going to focus quite heavily on this first step of what is good data. So, I'm going to start off with a little quote. If I have ever seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants, by Isaac Newton. This is quite a famous quote, but I wanted to emphasize what this really means when it comes to science. So we all think about science of someone going out there and researching one particular thing, and hey presto, that you've discovered something. The reality is that you have tens of thousands of scientists that are working on one particular area at one time, building up a bank of knowledge. And this is no different to health and wellness. We have tens of thousands of articles, published articles, research papers by scientists all around the world looking at health and wellness for many years. And this bank of evidence has been growing over time. And what Isaac and his colleagues tell us is that work-based health and wellness programs can do things like reduce absenteeism, improve engagement, increase productivity, improve staff retention. I'm not going to go through individual stats here because we've probably all seen those to death. But what I would encourage you to do is to go and have a look for yourself. Use Google Scholar, find out, research your own papers. The one criticism I have with research and science is that it is kind of confusing and there's a lot out there. And how on earth do you take all of that data and start to understand it for yourself in an easy to digest, understandable way? And that's one of the problems that we have. So, back to the real world. Tim represents the real world. Isaac, the science world, if you haven't noticed. That's not the joke, though. So 53% of UK businesses do not have any health and wellness benefits or programs. It seems strange considering science says it's good to have it. What we do know is spend is tiny compared to schemes in the States or even Scandinavia. We also have declining productivity levels. This is talked about a lot. Only Italy in the G7 is worse than us, which is pretty bad, and it's getting worse. The only good thing is that 51% of businesses do intend to spend more on their health and wellness this year than last year. So there is a growing need and demand for this, yet businesses do have a problem, or we have a problem in the industry. So, Tim versus Isaac Newton. So I believe we have an execution problem, but in particular for human resources. And what I mean by this is that if I was to see a manufacturer of steel tomorrow and say, hey, I've got a new piece of steel and it's 25% lighter and 25% stronger than your previous steel, they'd probably start using it next week. Yet we have great evidence to say that if you invest in health and wellness, you can improve productivity and reduce absenteeism and so on. Yet these things don't seem to be adopted within the human resource sphere as much as we'd like. I suppose the question is, why? So one of the reasons is this really kind of complicated, strange diagram that we have in front of us. And what I did here is that I pulled together this diagram of research. It's stuff that I researched myself. And what we have here is 4 different segments: physiology, cognition, so cognitive performance, job, and environment. And within each of these subcategories, things like cardiovascular fitness, nutrition, memory, stress, pay, co-workers, culture and values, there's a whole body of good research where people have researched the effect of one of these singular activities, so for example, stress on productivity or nutrition on leadership. Unfortunately, what researchers don't really do is look at the system as a whole. And that's where we have one of our major problems. As a business owner myself, I don't look at one of these things in isolation. I want to look at it as a whole. And if we don't look at systems as a whole, then it becomes very difficult for other managers to implement recommendations. So, research science can be hard to apply to business because it's complex and kind of confusing. Business is also quite different with lots of varying challenges. You know, we are all very different. Good metrics for one company will mean nothing for another in the same sector. But also outside of manufacturing, I would say that generally management have quite a poor understanding of the word productivity and what that really, really means. You know, we're great at other stuff. We're good at marketing, we're good at sales, but are we actually really good at understanding the core asset of our business, which is often people? And actually, I would suggest that we are not. So, the future solution, I'd like to point out it's not today, is that we, as an industry, we need to adopt a standard framework or language to help us make better decisions. A universal understanding of health and wellness data at work. You know, we need to better define terms like productivity. You know, how do we calculate sickness absence? Well, there are lots of different ways. Because this is confusing, we don't really help each other. In the future, we need to get better at this, but unfortunately that is not today, and I'll get off my soapbox. But moving towards where we are today, I'd like to talk about something called the stages of company health. So this is a piece of research that we did again, and what it is really trying to understand the state of play of UK business when it comes to health and wellness. In this particular survey that we did to 1,000 businesses, we found out that 53% of businesses had no health and wellness whatsoever. That's stage one. We found out that 9% of businesses have something called we call first steps, so they've got health insurance only. So good for the active people in the room here. At number 3, we have what else. So what else can we add to health insurance, which is again quite a normal journey for many businesses. Stage 4, small-scale health and wellness initiatives. So yes, we've got some things in place, but it's not really organised. It's not really data-driven, certainly. We then move on to company-wide benefits at 3%. Quite often we see banks in this territory have lots and lots of benefits, but no real strategy or organisation. And then we move on to the interesting area, which is 6 and 7. So 6 we would classify as data-driven. So data-driven health and wellness strategy, including year-on-year improvements, possibly some ROI. And then finally, employee performance-driven. So as per 6, but health and wellness intrinsically linked to performance and productivity. I'd like to point out that I've come across very few businesses operating at 6 or 7. I could be wrong. I would like to say I've probably come across no businesses at 7, although we are working with one company that I think are in the room today that are attempting to get to 7. And for myself and my team, what we're interested in helping businesses do is how can we help them achieve level 7? And how can we skip those intermediate stages as fast as possible? So let's talk about the details of what that data might be. So we did another survey. You can see a theme here. So we asked 1,000 respondents how are decisions made about health and wellness at work. So 16% said that the management use employee survey, which is a good source. 5% said they use health insurance data. 3% said they use online GP service data. And then we had guess by management, 33%. So as managers, we like to think that we know a lot about our company. I like to think I know quite a bit about my team of 16 people. The reality is I know less than I think, and that problem increases dramatically when you scale businesses. So it kind of becomes impossible if you're running a 1,400 person business to be able to really understand what's going on. So I'd suggest that that is not a reliable source of data. Health assessment data, again, can be used to make these decisions. Looking a bit more closely then at whether these data sources will give you enough employee data. So what I mean by this is that can we reach all of your employee population with this data? So employee surveys, the good old survey, still a good tool, right? It's easy, it's cheap, you can get a lot of data from it. It's subjective, but it's good. Health insurance data, about 10% of your staff will claim a year. It's great, good quality data, but only 10%. Online GP service, 25%, guessed by management, again. And then health assessment data, obviously I'm slightly biased, but we're gaining around 100 to 150 points of data from pathology through to nutrition, exercise, and so on. It's obviously a rich data source. In terms of frequency, which is the next key thing to consider, employee surveys can be run yearly, but actually quite often run very well quarterly as well as pulse surveys. Health insurance, generally I think probably best once a year because of the frequency. Online GP service, I'd say similar thing again. HR data depends on what you're collecting, but either once a year or once 6 months, but it does depend. Health assessments, generally these are done once a year. So again, what we're really talking about here is a long-term data strategy that probably has the main points once a year. So really to get any value, we're going to have to look at programs that are at least 3 years long. So moving on to quality. So what is good quality? And one of the things that I want to talk about now is the difference between what I want and what my body needs. And certainly the optimal place for intervention is somewhere in between those two things. And I'll explain with 2 examples. So in this particular example, we've got an employee survey where this individual says, I want high intensity interval training at work so I can get fit and lose weight. Seems reasonable, very fashionable right now. I do it myself, it's great. But then we look at the health assessment data, we find out that this employee has prediabetes, high blood pressure, is obese. Frankly, we wouldn't advise this person to do HIIT. They're definitely high risk. If this person turned around and had a stroke at work, then that would not be ideal for anybody. Example number 2, I would like to work through lunch and go home early. Seems like a nice thing to do. It'd be nice as an employer to let them do that. You look at assessment data, find out this person has vitamin D deficiency. This could be making them tired at work, could be degrading some of their performance. Our advice to this person would probably be, well, maybe you should get some sunshine at lunchtime instead, right? Of course, you could take a supplement, but I think that probably the best solution is go and do some exercise, get outside, do something. So I think on those 2 basic examples, you can see that what people necessarily want isn't the same as what they need. The next thing to consider is the need for multiple data sources. So no one data source is going to give you everything you need to be able to make good decisions. One of the things you need to consider is the fact that there's a difference between hard data, facts, and soft data, so subjective opinions. Both useful, but should be used together. So the employee survey, again, gives you a lot of data, but it is subjective, which we just talked about. Health insurance, good quality data, but it's not much of it. Online GP service, the same. HR data, it just depends on what you've got, but it can be very high quality, can also be very minimal at the same time, as we know. And then obviously health assessment data again. You've got a very strong data set of pathology-based health assessments, nutrition, etc. and so on. So when you start to combine those different data sources together, you start to get to a point where you've got a strong data set where you can make good decisions. And this really is the foundation of a good strategy. So the next thing to consider is sources of comparison. We quite often recommend the Office for National Statistics as the best UK resource to be able to compare some of your stats to. They don't have everything, but they do have some decent measures like life satisfaction, job satisfaction, productivity data. We also recommend Net Promoter Score. I think most people have heard of this these days, but it's a useful measure to be able to compare into industry. Interesting, you can compare Greg's there to Apple, who seem to be doing quite well. I'm not sure Apple would agree with them being on the same page as Greg's, but anyhow. Tim laughs at my poor jokes. But the most important thing really is to compare your own data over time, really, because that's how you find out if really you're making an improvement. These other metrics are, to some degree, vanity, but they certainly might help shift the board in the right direction if they find out they're underperforming compared to their competition. So, the last couple of slides I'm going to talk about ROI. This is a massive topic, and to be honest, it could be an hour-long conversation by itself. So I'm going to quickly talk about the fact that ROI is really tough. There's no one formula for this. It should be specific to each individual business needs. It will be highly customized. It will evolve every single year, and it will get better over time, but you will not get it right in year one, for sure. I've got a bit of a complicated slide here, and I just thought I'm going to add a bit more meat to this and talk about how we calculate some things when we talk about ROI. So the way we calculate sickness absence cost is that we look at the average cost of a day's salary lost for that particular organisation. Sometimes we break it down by a different seniority level. We then also look at lost revenue for that day too, which I think is really important. If you're sick, it's not just the cost of that, you're actually impacting the performance of that business that day. When we calculate key person risk, we look at the average annual salary of that key person. We then tend to times it by 3 to 5, depending on that organisation or depending on how important that person is for that particular business, and then create a sort of risk profile based on that. And then from a productivity point of view, we tend to, productivity can be measured in many different ways. The easiest way to start is by using the same measures as the Office for National Statistics. So we use revenue generated per employee hour. So to calculate that, we take total revenue, divide by number of employees, divide by number of working hours. And this gives us a revenue per employee hour. And this can be compared directly to industry averages across the region and across industry online. We also have an interesting tool that we've just created to help you do this, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. So to sum up, good health and wellness data is planned for now and for the future. It is based on existing knowledge and science, is standardized, is of high quality, has high penetration of your employee base, is subjective and factual, comes from multiple data sources, and is the foundation of a successful strategy. Thank you.